Thank you. We're live.
Okay, thanks. I'd like to call the meeting of the New York City Audit Committee for Wednesday, 24th, 2023 to order. And the first item of business, I'd like to call about the secretary to call the roll call.
Good morning, everyone. Starting with our private members, Michael Spitzer, Chair.
Present.
Larry and Angelo.
Present.
Mark Kaplan.
Present.
Marsha Van Wagner.
Present.
Our public members representing Mayor Eric Adams, Paul Timus.
Present.
Representing Controller Brad Lander, Jacqueline Thompson.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. We're holding this meeting remotely because I'm sorry.
Adam, it's an audit committee meeting. I'll call you back.
We're holding this meeting remotely because based on the proclamation or resolution by the mayor, we would be entitled to. So I'm going to read it, so it's going to be part of the record. Whereas the mayor of the city of New York issued Executive Order 411 extending the declaration of state of emergency in the city due to the COVID-19 pandemic for a period not to exceed 30 days or until rescinded. And whereas pursuant to New York Public Officers Law, Section 103-A, parenthesis 3, the Open Meetings Law, if the chief executive of the city has proclaimed a local state of emergency and a public body determines that the circumstances necessitating the emergency declaration affect or impair the ability of the public body to hold an in-person meeting, the in-person participation requirements of the open meeting laws are not applicable. And whereas the New York City Audit Committee is a public body subject to the open meetings law, and whereas in conjunction with the mayor so declared state of emergency due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the Audit Committee has determined that the ability of the Audit Committee to hold in-person meetings is so affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. It is therefore resolved that so long as the mayor of the city has declared state of emergency in the city due to the COVID-19 pandemic, meetings of the Audit Committee may be held fully remotely. So, Pat, you have that for the minutes. Okay. The next item of business to come before the committee is a motion to accept the minutes of the Audit Committee meeting held on April 5th, 2023.
I move it.
I second.
Very few edits should be there for these minutes.
Mike, I just want to announce for the record that our public member representing Public Advocate Jamani Williams, Wesley Paisley, is present.
Okay, thank you. Welcome, Wes. The next item on the business of business to come before the Audit Committee is the financial statements and management letters for Health and Hospital Corp. Is there a representative of Health and Hospital? I still call it Health and Hospitals, but Health and Hospital Corp. That's going to present to us. And if there is, could you please give your name and all the people here affiliated with the organization, including the auditors?
Sure. It's me, David Guzman. I'm the controller for NYC Health and Hospitals, and I do the same thing. I still refer to it as HHC. I'm joined here today by my colleagues, Linda DeHart, James Linhart, Joseph DeBroja, Olurutimi Diallo. And today we will be presenting the FY22 financial statements for Health and Hospitals Corporation. In FY22, we experienced obviously the operational effects from COVID, the third year of COVID. So there's activity relating to funding around COVID and expenses incurred due to COVID. We also had some new phenomena such as monkeypox. I'm sure you all have heard of that. We had to contend with, which also affected us operationally speaking, and from a response perspective. As we present the financial statements, I think you're going to note an improvement to our financials, which we're happy about. That's really driven by receipts around upper payment limit revenue, which we will get into as we move forward with the presentation. At this point, I'm going to turn over the presentation to our Director of Financial Planning, Joseph DeBroja, who will walk us through the income statements in detail. We'll be happy to answer any questions you may have at that point.
Yeah, and before that, I just want to introduce that representatives from our accounting firm, Grant Thornton LLP, are online as well. You guys want to introduce yourselves?
Sure. Good morning. My name is Lou Feuerstein. I'm Managing Director with Grant Thornton. The engagement partner, Tammy Radinsky, had a conflict today and could not be here. So we worked together throughout the course of the audit. And then also with me is Steve Diaguardi. He was the on-site senior manager responsible for the field work of the audit. And that's the two of us from Grant Thornton for NYC Health and Hospitals.
Joseph?
Good morning, everybody. Name is Joseph DeBroja. I am the Director of Accounting and Finance in our Controllers Division. I prepare the financial statements and the numbers that I'll be presenting this morning. Not sure if you guys have a physical copy or a PDF copy of our financials, but in any event, I will be.
The audit committee members have both, I believe.
Both, okay. Well, I will share a file on the screen of our income statements so that you guys can refer to it easily, because I know our 22 and 21 are two different pages. So for any interest of, putting it together and easily explaining and referencing it, I put it all on one page. So I will share the screen if that's okay with everybody.
That's fine. Pat, you're the only host.
Our IT is hosting up, but Joseph's able to share.
Okay, yeah. Do you all see the screen?
Mhm.
Okay, great.
Is there
So
a way to make it larger?
not sure do you have that option via Zoom on your screens?
No, we don't.
No, okay. Is this better or should I go further?
Now it sounds like an eye chart.
I'm having eye surgery soon, so I use my fingers.
Okay. Well, all right. So we have, this is our income statement, right? So fiscal year 22 income statement and 21. So you guys can compare it. I will be going over the consolidated numbers. Consolidated numbers meaning our hospitals plus our Metro Plus insurance plan that we have, and any eliminations between the two, because as we consolidate financials, we have to eliminate revenues and expenses from Metro Plus and HHC. So overall, you can see that our operating revenue that includes UPL conversion, prior period revenue, increased by $1.7 billion. So that is on this line right here, total operating revenues. Our overall operating expenses increased also by $699.9 million. That would be this line right over here, the 13 out of 13. And now I will go into each of the line items and the variance analysis as to why they increased or decreased. Our net patient service revenue, this line right here, that includes DISH and UPL. It increased by $86.7 million. The increase is mainly driven by an increase in discharges by 17,000 more patients in FY22.
Could you please identify or explain what the UPL stands for and what it means?
I think Linda is joined. She is the expert in reimbursement and DISH and UPL. So Linda, if you can help out with a question.
Sure. UPL actually stands for upper payment limit. It's a federal Medicaid regulation that governs what states are allowed to pay for Medicaid services and effectively sets the limit at what Medicare would pay for similar services, which is typically much higher than states' regular Medicaid rates. So we work with the state and the federal government to make use of this provision to receive what we call supplemental Medicaid payments that are above and beyond the regular state Medicaid rate, bringing us up to that federal payment limit.
Well, how come it's in 2022 and not 21 and 20?
So historically, it's only been available for our what are called fee-for-service patients, meaning they are their Medicaid payments are directly managed by the state and not by a managed care plan that contracts with the state to provide Medicaid services. And the bulk of the Medicaid business has shifted to managed care over time. So we've been working for some time to get the authority to get the benefit of that payment on the managed care side as well. And we were able to implement that this year. So that's what we refer to as the conversion, expanding that payment into managed care. So we got that implemented during our fiscal 2022, and it was retroactive to part of 21. So that's why we have both an overall increase in revenue as well as that significant prior year amount.
Okay, now I understand this.
But these services were provided in prior years, but you're recording it as current year operating income?
The piece that we received for prior year services, because it wasn't authorized by the federal government prior to this point, we weren't able to recognize it previously.
All right.
So following up on Mike's question, does that mean for 2023, it's going to be a much smaller number?
Yes.
Because this one is really an average, it reflects 2 or 3 prior years. Is that it?
Just one prior year.
Just one? Seems to me this should have called for a footnote. I have a very minor comment on the hold on financial statement. As I understand it, the name of the city is the City of New York. And you consistently use City of New York, the City of New York, and lowercase the. I think maybe next time you should be consistent. And if I can move on from one more thing, there's a huge swing in the pension liability. I assume that's as a result of something the actuary did?
Mhm.
Yes, that is correct. So we rely on the actuary to provide us with the calculation and the number for the expense that we record on our income statement. The main reason for the increase is due to the decrease in earnings of pension plan investments over the course of fiscal 22.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so it wasn't what the auditor did, it was the market.
Correct.
I have a question back on the upper payment limit issue. So the upper payment limit is for certain services rendered. And prior to them being eligible, you know, for a, I guess whatever this conversion is, were those payments being made to some other party? The upper payment limit payments?
No, these are new payments.
They're new payments. Okay. So previously the services are being rendered, but there was no upper payment limit compensation anywhere in the system
For the managed care services,
for
correct?
the managed care services. Okay.
Okay, I have a question. There's a reference in the footnotes to a test and trace program. I guess, what is that?
Well, it is a test and trace program that we have been running since the, I guess, start of the pandemic. We've had test sites in our hospitals and together with our DNTCs or diagnostic and treatment centers. It's a grant program, so it's meant to make us whole. The expenses are funded by different grants such as ELC, FEMA grants, and there's also some of the billing revenue for the testing services.
Because it starts off with test and trace and then test and treat. I just wonder whether it would be a good idea to explain that a little bit to a reader. Now, I have a couple other minor questions. The land and land improvements go down by,
Mark, what page are you
on page 9. Land and land improvements decreased by appreciable number. What happened?
You're on page 9.
Page 9 is,
It's part of the MDA.
They decreased by about 2.9 million.
Something like that, yes.
Mhm.
well, it's not the land, it's the improvements to the land, but we'll get back to you with more details on that.
Whatever it is, it's just a big number and it made me think about it.
Any time somebody asks a question that you say you'll get back, please get back to Katrina Stauffer,
Yes.
secretary, and then she'll distribute it to all the members.
Mhm.
Thanks.
Like we did last year.
I had a question on the UPL. The higher rate will continue going forward, yes? It's just you'll have fewer people getting it, right? Or fewer quantity.
Right, fewer because it will just be, one
Yeah,
annual value,
1 year rather than several years. Okay, but you continue to get the higher rate.
right?
Good. The other question I had was how much of the improvement in your finances is really due to COVID? I mean, you had to do more, but you got paid more. So I'm just curious as to what you think the impact of that was.
I mean, it's a good question. It's something that we actually, I don't want to say struggle with, but we grapple with understanding the true impact of COVID because, our volumes went up, our CMI went up.
Yes,
So on average, we collect more for those cases.
right.
We also have kind of grants coming in as well. So,
Mhm.
and then tracking the values, our values have teetered off now, in 2022,
Sure.
and we're seeing that now in
Luckily.
23 as well. And then you have other things happening like monkeypox. So it's really it's a great question. And I think it's something, that we continue to look at. I think as it relates to these financial statements, the big driver that we see is not so much COVID because we had that in the prior year, but it's really this UPL phenomena. But if we were to look at, 2022 as it relates to pre-pandemic, that's where your question is a very valid one. We could see perhaps that, economically speaking, there might be a, upward lift in kind of, our revenue, looking at the baseline pre-pandemic. So it's a great question.
Will you be doing that analysis at any point in the future?
Yeah,
Because I'm sort of curious to see, I mean, obviously you don't want a pandemic, but given the fact that you had one, it is interesting to see if it actually helped out HHC.
It's a good question. I could take that back to our CFO to see if, he wants to really kind of commission an analysis like that. But I think it's a worthwhile one. Something that we really should do, I think. It would be very informative.
Okay, and just one more question, although I'm going to have more, but sorry. Do you expect any other increase in rates for other areas?
In rates for as a
In other
managed
words, the services.
Well, we increased kind of organically, as rates increase as we negotiate with managed care plans,
Okay.
things of that nature. I don't think, I mean, and Linda could maybe, lend some insight here, but I don't think we're expecting something of the nature that we saw with UPL conversion here. It was such a large lift.
Yeah.
I'm not aware of anything like that happening in the future. Yeah,
Okay, thank you very much.
sure.
I look forward to seeing that analysis. It would be
Yeah,
interesting.
you and me both. I would love to see it as well.
If I'm,
And a follow-up to Larian's question. Hi, I would like to also know, because this is from last year, I had asked about the sites that you guys had created in Bronx, Queens, and Brooklyn, 3 sites for addressing long-time COVID, long-term COVID. And I would like to see if when you do the analysis for Larian, for its financials, could you also do analysis for those sites that were created because of long-term COVID and the impact in the community? Meaning, are you treating other individuals beyond COVID in those sites? And is it helping the general population because there's more health centers that are within their proximity?
You're talking about the centers of excellence, correct?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, those just recently got operating certificates for each of them. We're currently in the process of bringing on them fully online as separate entities in our financials, meaning separate identifying numbers rather than commingled with other hospitals and then other DNTCs. So yes, they are treating other patients as well. They're not just COVID related cases. And I could share with you a report, from Gotham Health, later on when they publish it with regards to exactly what they're doing at those sites.
Oh, great. And you'll be sending that to Katrina, correct?
Yeah. Like I did. You had the same question last year.
I know I did. This today is just me repeating last year. I have another follow-up question for what I also asked last year too. So
Okay.
yeah.
all right, well,
And- oh, sorry.
go ahead. I have,
So
Right.
I had another follow-up question, as you know, with the electronic medical record training. I just want to know how that is going as an update.
I'm not sure. I know we implemented Epic many years ago, our kind of relatively new EMR. We do train, as it relates to new staff that are onboarded. There are requirements for training depending on their role within the system. So there's a very robust program around that, and some of it could be, ELM online, or we actually have certified trainers embedded in the sites to train folks that are more intimately involved in the application, such as providers who have to really navigate within the system. So there was a big investment to just stand up those little training programs across the system to ensure that we're perpetually training staff and ensuring competency in using the system.
Okay, so I'm gonna read off my question and I'm gonna read off the answer that I got for last year. My question was, what are your plans on educating staff on EMR? Because listing another document, there was a prior history of being audited, and it was just generally just one review that you're having a new system. Your answer was EITS, Enterprise Information Technology Services, and Revenue Cycle Services partnered to provide training to revenue cycle staff at a tailored-based curriculum based on individual's job function, aka a role-based approach. The H2O IT training team provided classes to teach EPIC functionality. In 2019, we implemented the Revenue Cycle Institute to develop and implement ongoing system-level revenue cycle training. This has grown to offer approximately 30 instructor-led classes in addition to 133 e-learning modules, which are available to H&H staff. In FY22, over 3,700 individuals participated in RCI classes. So my follow-up question is just to see, out of the, 3,700, what is that of makeup of your staff? Or if you could just give me a general number over your staff, how are they getting treated moving forward into F123 and so on?
So I think thank you for that. I didn't have that context, but our training, and actually that's another layer of training that you're referring to, because we have kind of onboarding and new staff training. EITS actually has oversight of what I told you, which was the little kind of training program within the site to train new staff, new providers. Rev Cycle Services is kind of its own little umbrella and kind of focused area of training. And they actually offer what you read off, they offer perpetually. So every year they kind of put out metrics, new training modules. And they work to like solicit enrollment from staff, particularly billing staff that, because it's rev cycle and coders. They kind of target those staff members within our organization for this enhanced training. And that's perpetual. That institute is ongoing. They offer new classes, and they kind of have a whole program around engaging facilities to encourage kind of enrollment in those programs, almost like a mini university, if you will, but for rev cycle, or kind of what that is offering. And but it's targeted to the billing staff of the organization.
Yep, and billing is very important.
Yes, absolutely.
So is there a way that you guys could give me an update? Is this, or do you have something now for an update? Just curious.
We could go back to RevSec because I know they track enrollment numbers. If that's your question, we could kind of provide like details around or summary data around how many staff took the training. If that's helpful, if you wanted like kind of proportion of billing staff and then who took the training, we're happy to do that analysis, but I don't have that ready here on this call.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, so if you could just send the exact question over Katrina, that would be great, because all I got from that was out of the 3,700 staff, what makes that up, that it was trained, what does that make up for this year portions? So so I just want to make sure that we're responding to the correct question that you're asking.
And thank you so much for the clarification.
Okay.
I am done for now, but I would probably have more questions.
Okay,
later.
Mark, you had said you had some questions.
There are several little things. On page 10, there's a sentence that says that the projects are funded through city capital. What does through mean? City makes a contribution to capital. What's the concept behind the word through?
What paragraph is that?
First paragraph, first dot, next to last line. The 3 projects are to be funded through city capital. What is through? I mean, the city just puts it in?
Yes. That's basically it. The city
Yeah.
provides us funds to pay for our
Okay,
improvement projects.
from an accounting point of view, what is that recorded as?
That is recorded as a capital contribution funded
Okay.
City of New York.
All right, so I think maybe that's the way to say it. And then the budget amount is 66 million, and the total estimated, so it's sure ahead of, you're doing better than the budget amount. I understand that. And then there's another funny looking thing. In the next paragraph, it says, at the end of fiscal 2022, $7.6 million is placed in service. That's amusing to think of dollar bills doing that, but I leave that to you. Those are minuscule issues.
And so do you want Joseph to finish his variance analysis and explanations?
Yes. Let's get back to that first.
Okay. So I started and left off here at the appropriations from City of New York. You all might know it better as the tax levy. The tax levy increased by $341.7 million. It is mostly due to an increase in cash that we received from the city of $134.4 million. And in FY22, we were not obligated to pay the city back for debt service as we were in a previous year, meaning 2021. Debt figure for that service in 21 was 212 million. Sorry, is there a question?
I don't know what page you're on, but I have a couple of things on page 14. I did have I actually read the part of this in my doctor's office. And it says the reference including specialized services like cardiology care.
Say the mayor's just saying.
And my doctor couldn't explain to me what cardiology care is. So I wonder what that means.
I'm not sure. Can you repeat the question?
If you look on the third paragraph on page 11, there's the services like cardiology care. And I happened to read that sentence while I was waiting for my doctor. And I asked him what cardiology care was, and he couldn't tell me.
Oh, that's for this, that's for the new Centers of Excellence programs. Okay, we'll get back to you with regards to exactly what types of cardiology care that they're providing there in the in Centers of Excellence.
I'm also amused in the prior first paragraph, the total amount placed in service was $14 million. So that what you're saying there, what you placed in service, the dollars, that's not quite right, is it?
No. So they would normally, what we mean by placed in service is it's been opened and the equipment is being used, right?
I assume that was right, but the amount refers to dollars.
Right, the dollar amount would be the dollar amount of the equipment that's been placed in service.
Oh, that's different. Okay.
Okay, you guys think I can continue with the income
Okay,
statement?
I'm sorry, I beg your pardon, I have just one more question. Just speaking of your relationship with the city, did you get a PEG? Are you expecting a PEG for next year?
I believe we did get a PEG.
And how large was it?
I don't know because the budget team was handling that. I don't know, Linda, if you have insight around
I
the
don't-
total for the PEG.
I don't have the number in front of me, but it was in the range of 12 or $14 million.
Larry, and the PEG that you're referring to, is it for 23 or 24?
23 and 24,
Okay.
either or both.
We had a PEG in the November plan and again in this just past exec plan.
Okay, and that's in the range of 12 to 14 million.
About that, we can follow up with the exact
Okay,
number.
thank you very much.
Okay. Moving on, premium revenue. Premium revenue is all Metro Plus driven. Premium revenue increased by 755.7 million. Most of it is due to the H&H upper payment limit. It's kind of like the program that we run together, and other service lines that they have. Their membership also increased by 9%. So that also drove their revenue up, premium revenue. So their premium revenue goes up and so does their expense, which we will see later on in the OTPS section and the operating expense section down below. Grants revenue decreased by $50.3 million. Most of this decrease is due to the BBP QIP program revenue decrease. Because in the prior year, we recognized 2 years worth of this program, and none this year. Other revenue decreased by $10.1 million. It is mostly driven by the ACO revenue, increased by 10.5, sorry. Mostly driven by the accountable care organization revenue that increased by 6.7 million in 22. And of course, as we've been discussing thus far, the UPL conversion prior period revenue increased obviously $514 million. And we didn't have any of that in FY21. Those are our operating revenues. Moving on to our operating expenses. We see that the PS, or our salary numbers, have increased $57.9 million. And this increase is mainly due to the staff nursing emergency overtime usage that we had, probably due to the Omicron emergency.
And I had one question about the staffing. The nurses contract, where are you with that?
I don't think that happened in FY22, but I think that's coming up in 23. Not sure.
Yeah.
And you haven't settled it yet, have you? Or have you?
I think that's currently being worked on. There's negotiations that are
Okay,
happening.
so there's negotiation.
My last
Okay.
conversation with labor relations, Jonathan.
Okay, great. Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
Sure.
we get you what our contract status is moving forward.
Moving on to other than personnel services, OTPS increased $336.4 million. It is worth noting that while the HHC side of OTPS decreased by $256 million, most of this increase is due to the Metro Plus risk expense and incurred but not reported claims expense that's driving most of this increase in premium revenue up on top. So like I said, as their premium revenue goes up, so do their risk expenses and IBNR. And it's very, insurance specific. So we rely on our Metro Plus colleagues to work up the numbers, and they have their own actuaries and all the other stuff. Fringe benefits increased $24.3 million. That's kind of like consistent, I would say. Pension, as Mr. Kaplan alluded to before, increased $298.7 million. And as I said, it's mostly due to the decrease in earnings of the pension plan investments over the course of fiscal 22. Post-employment benefits other than pension, these are mostly retiree health benefits. This number is also derived by the city actuary. It decreased by $200.2 million. And the decrease is largely due to a change in the discount rate from 2.18% to 4.09%, as well as changes in expected and actual experience and assumptions made.
Sorry to interrupt. I have a question. If you go back to what you previously said about the pension plan, because I'm looking at my notes from last year. We also had a note again by Mark Kaplan regarding to the pension being decreased in investments. I think the number was something around 419 million, and that was FY21, and then you say there's another one for FY22. So is there? So again, just for me, from my understanding, is it due to market forces? The reason why there is a change in investments and so on? Just curious.
I believe so. I mean, these are wild swings that actuary has to take into account. And like I said, the calculation comes straight from the actuary, the city actuary, that is. So in 21, I think it might have been a huge swing upwards in the plan investments. And in 22, it was going the other way, right? So that's what contributed to this increase in pension this time around.
Okay. All right. That's it. I just want a clarification on that.
Sure. Okay. Affiliation contracted services increased $155.4 million. Most of this increase is mainly due to contractual increases and the cost of living adjustment settlements with the affiliates. Depreciation increased $27.3 million, and it's mostly due to the EITS assignments, meaning most of our, computer equipment and the cost of servers and so on. And those are our operating results for FY22.
Well, you didn't mention the fact that there was an interest expense item here, of a big number that shows up. How does that compare last year? And where did it come from?
What number would that be?
I think he's
It's
referring to the 115 million, Joe, on row 27.
It's an interest expense of $136 million.
Okay, yeah, so the interest expense, so interest expense in FY22 was 115 million. And in FY21, it was 135 million. This is mostly driven by the city debt that the city pays on our behalf. That kind of funds our projects, right? So we put that on our in our interest expense. So DASNY, GEO, TFA interest, that's largely makes up this portion right here.
Well, is that accompanied by an increase in obligation to the city someplace?
Right, so if the city was obligating us to pay back for debt service, that would be on our balance sheet as a payable back to the city, right? In FY21, the city asked us to pay it back, and that figure was $212 million. But in 22, the city did not obligate us to pay back for debt service. Excuse me.
Okay.
So just to follow up on that, you're not really able to plan for the city's requests about whether or not, I mean, I don't, is that something that HHC negotiates with the city in terms of the requirement to pay back debt service? Or is it kind of totally, happening over at OMB? How does that get determined, whether you're paying that or not?
Well, I think Linda can explain this better. She has more experience with budget negotiations. But yeah, pretty much what you described is correct.
Yeah, I mean, the current arrangement is that we generally do not pay it back, but it is always subject to negotiation. So the city may request it, but we, at this point, don't anticipate that they're likely to request it.
Is there an interest rate on that debt?
Interest rate as HHC paying the city back?
Yeah.
Okay, or
So it's the actual debt service that the city has on its bonds that it's issued on behalf of HHC projects. So it's whatever the city rate is on that debt is embedded in what we're paying them.
So that number here represents not only the principal amount, but the accrued interest.
Yes.
And the city pays it wherever it feels like it can.
The city, I mean, it is a city obligation. So the city pays it, and then the city, sort of negotiates its financial arrangement with us, and that determines whether or not we repay the city. And as I said, we generally are not repaying them at this point.
Okay. Well, I can't resist asking this question. If the interest rate is determined as an obligation on our part or your part, does the fact that the city has no defined maturity year affect the carrying cost of the obligation? And do you then imply an interest rate into the debt?
More part of the city's bond sales might be for HHC purposes. So they would be all in the amortization schedule of the city's debt. and the associated interest. It's always negotiated between the city and, forgive me, HHC, to see what they will pay us back based on their income.
No, I appreciate that. I'm just trying to think of how it gets accounted for. Because if you don't, if there's no, typically, if you have a debt and you don't have a maturity, you have one thing. If you have a maturity, you have another. And if it's all, I will if I can, there's an implicit interest rate that would be higher in the market anyhow.
I think that, I mean, there are maturities. I think these are, the city bonds issued for specific, types of purposes. So it's the debt is not based on the relationship between H&H and the city. It's governed by those bond issuances that the city has made.
So that from standpoint of the hospital corporation, you carry that liability based upon.
We don't carry a liability for it. We only, if we pay it, it affects the city appropriations line that Joseph referred to, that is sort of a net of funds exchanged between us and the city.
Okay, I suppose I understand that.
All right. If there's no other questions about the financials, I'd like to move off to the management letter.
So I believe we could, I guess it would be the GT colleagues of ours to discuss.
Sure, Lou Feuerstein again. Can we have that letter pulled up so everyone can see it? I don't know if Joseph or James. Just be easier to see.
Oh, before you get off this, in the events subsequent, I am accustomed to seeing reference to the COVID situation. Are we at a point where we don't think that has to be, this has a subsequent event footnote sort of thing?
I believe COVID should have its own note.
Does it? Maybe I could get to it later. All right, well, before, one other thing.
It's note 18.
Is it? It's probably there. I just made the note for myself. HHC's policy to mitigate custodial credit risk is to collateralize all balances where permitted. Mitigate custodial is. I assume that means that when you put money in a bank, you get collateral equal to the amount of the deposit. That's what this is saying, isn't it?
I believe so.
Yeah. Okay, sorry.
And I have one follow-up question regarding to that. And it's just nested back in Larian's question. When you do the evaluations of the effect of the pandemic, I'm curious about personal expenses, because I remember in the last time we met last year, there was an increase due to pandemic expenditures. And I would like to know, as gradually is going over year, I'm not saying I will be here every year, but someone in my office will ask that question. How is it, like, maybe a nice chart showing that expenditures, even if they are rising naturally with just the market, where are they coming from? Like, some is coming from the pandemic, maybe it's going down over time because we had more studies of long-term COVID, and then other expenditures of monkeypox and so on. Because again, it'd just be nice to see these personal expenses, how they're going up, what is significantly affecting it as a good predictor.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense.
then.
We
Thank
will
you.
look at
That's
that.
it.
Now, would you like us to focus on just PS or OTPS as well?
Right now I'm gonna go OPTS, but I defer judgment to the wiser members of this committee.
I would suggest both.
Like I said, the wiser members.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, as long as we're not all the way back yet. On page 33, that certain payers have performed audits and promote various disallowances. Where does that amount show up on the balance sheet?
What note are you on? I'm sorry.
4,
Four.
footnote 4, page 33. Last sentence of the first paragraph. I confess I didn't go back to the balance sheet and look for it. Is it reflected there?
Yeah, I mean, our, it would be in our patient AR and in our net patient service revenue numbers. Yeah, it would be net of that, right? So our AR is the net realizable value of our services and gross charges.
Okay, so that disallowance shows up there. Okay, that's what I thought.
Okay, the management letter?
Everybody see my screen?
Yes, I can.
Okay, Lou, you want me to go where?
Is it possible you could still make it larger? Great, thank you.
Lou?
Okay, I'm unmuted. That letter was issued in November of 2022, discussed with the audit committee of New York City Health and Hospitals. As auditors, we're responsible to communicate with those charged with governance, typically the audit committee, any significant internal control deficiencies and material weaknesses. And if you had a chance to look at the letter, really this one area that is of most concern, and we can go down to the comment in front of us that relates to the provider relief fund grants that were received and the FEMA grants that were received. And if my memory is correct, predominantly in fiscal 2022, the grants related essentially all to FEMA for the most part. And you can see from our recommendation that we would recommend that a formal analysis by funding source, be it FEMA, be it PRF or others, be performed, reviewed, and approved on a regular basis, including backed up by appropriate documentation. And we wanted to make sure that the organization recognizes grant revenues and related expenses on an accurate basis and appropriately throughout the year. And our observation that did not happen in 2022. And if you scroll down a little bit more, we come up, that first comment I talked about was a material weakness. We do have, and we scroll down a little more, a significant deficiency, but really they kind of go hand in hand. And the theme here is to make sure the organization, if not on a monthly basis, at least quarterly, goes through and does a detailed accounting of these grants, and then provide and prepare appropriate documentation for those grants. We saw that was more or less a carryover comment from 2021. Now, the good news is we started our planning for fiscal 23 audit, and we do not anticipate this being a problem in the current year because essentially the PRF and FEMA monies, at least for 2023, will be relatively small to zero amount. So, but management, we have met with management, finance, controls department, Linda's folks, and we've got a good understanding of how these grants should be recorded, when they should be recorded, and the appropriate documentation behind it. And there's some other comments throughout the letter, but really for the purposes of this committee, those would be the two major items that are worth discussion, and obviously be happy to answer question or discuss any other comments.
What would the impact of this, or was there an impact of this on the single audit?
The single audit is not performed at the New York City Health and Hospitals level. It's performed at the New York City level.
I know.
So that is different.
That's basically why I'm asking the question, because this is incorporated within ours.
Right. But at the end of the day, the accounting and the documentation was appropriate.
All the funds were accounted for and everything, and all
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, we had no concerns at the end of the day with the dollar amounts recorded or the documentation. It was just getting those kind of, if you will, those cards in order timely during the year rather than subsequent to the year. We have a June 30th year end, and the organization in September, October was still trying to finalize that analysis. And our comment is, gee, you really should do that, periodically during the year. It shouldn't be kind of an end of the year effort.
But a question in my mind arises to the fact, like, you're basically saying that this might slightly go away because of the funding drying up because of COVID diminishing. But what happens to the next one? Are there procedures and systems in place that this comment wouldn't happen again?
Yeah, I think if you allow me to jump in here, that's a great valid point. This kind of, highlighted some process gaps that, that really persist even beyond, FEMA, and we're really looking to the future of, we really don't want anything to happen, but things happen. We had Hurricane Sandy. So the organization has really taken this quite seriously. We actually have engaged a third party to review our processes, in particular in grants and, in that area, and making sure that there's alignment between the claims and accounting for those claims, on the financial statements. That work started this fiscal year, the tail end of this fiscal year, and it will continue in the new fiscal year. So 23 it started, and it will continue to 24. And we've been working very, very hard, with those folks to really improve and optimize our processes. I think the underlying processes are what contributed to a lot of this. And if we don't cure that, we fear that this will, happen again, and we don't want that to happen again. So a great deal of effort has been invested to really get those processes in order.
Do you guys have a grants management system, like a formal grants management system?
And that's kind of, I think, part of the problem from what I see. And I came to the organization, in this role in September, and what I saw is a lot.
Well, then we'll blame you for everything.
We're managing, or the grants team, managing using Excel spreadsheets sometimes. So it's like,
yeah.
How do you manage $1 billion in a spread? I love Excel as much as the next person, but
yeah,
I think that's part of what we're looking at is perhaps, making some investments
right.
in the systems to track expenses. Yeah. We do, have an ERP, and there are like kind of grants modules within the ERP that we do, PeopleSoft. So we do have that. But I think where we take that information and kind of track it outside of that system, we're using things like Excel, and I think that's part of the problem. It takes a long time if you're, looking at something with 500,000 rows and all this information, and it's fluid, it keeps changing, it updates. That's really not, it's really suboptimal from that perspective. So that's something that we're definitely looking into.
And just a kind of operational question. So the hospitals, right? Do they feed into a central system? So and so obviously they're getting Medicare and Medicaid grants and all of that. How do you aggregate all that, and how do you track it?
So I think there's intersection. We have the central office, if you will, corporate, and we have the various, to your point, grants
Right.
departments at the sites. And I think
Right.
that there's shared responsibility. So there's some grants that they manage locally. They're responsible for passing that information to central. So there's kind of synergy between the two,
Mhm.
but there are some, large scale grants, like when you
Right.
talk about the FEMAs of the world,
Yeah.
that's managed centrally, but there is intersection because a lot of those expenses are living and breathing within the facilities, so
Yeah.
it's a good question. It's really just a collaboration between the site departments and the central grants department. And that's kind of what we're looking at as well, because communication is so important, right? And that synergy is so important. If there's a breakdown there, it leads to potential problems, that we see in some of these comments. So definitely that's a great question, and yeah.
And it's not automated, right? Because you don't really have a centralized grants management system, right? So if a grant comes into a hospital, it doesn't like automatically get into the central database. Am I getting that right?
I would hate to, because I'm not the grants expert. I
Right.
don't know if Linda has any kind of insight, but from what I see and glean in my, limited time here, we do have the ERP system I refer to, PeopleSoft, and I think the grants team does leverage that system to kind of register grants and track expenses.
Yeah.
But oftentimes they extract information out of that system, and then there's more kind of work done on the grants end that's happening within Excel and things like that. And that's where you see the problem occurring. But I think to a certain extent, we do have, that living and breathing within a bona fide ERP system.
But with respect to things that may be coming in directly to a facility, or where the facility may be more directly involved in managing a grant, there is communication between that central office grants team and the facilities grants team, and they do sort of vet the full list. So they have a handle on what's going on at facilities, but it is a manual process.
Right. Which is, I mean, and OMB in the city has had the same problem, Paul. We'll talk about that. And yeah, unless it's automatic, it's hard.
They're very difficult.
Agreed.
I have a couple of little questions. What are affiliations vacation accrual? What does that mean?
What page is that?
Page 63.
Mark, we're in the management letter.
Oh, I apologize. Well, I thought we were done with it, but all right.
No, I have another comment or question.
And I'll withdraw.
The patient receivables and the negative balances. I mean, this first starts in 2018. It still continues. And there's a comment in here that a policy and procedure document is going to be prepared by the end of the calendar year. And my question is, was it prepared?
And this is for accounts receivable? Not
The
grants.
comment, like, there's no page numbers, but it's on the signature page of Grant Thornton. Right above system response. This was in the management's response of 2022. This, like last year.
This one right here, he's talking about.
Keep on going. Go to the next page. Go to 2022, keep on going.
Right there?
Yep. The right above system response.
Excuse me.
The very last sentence, this document will be finalized by the end of the current calendar year. So my question is, was it prepared and finished?
I believe in conversations with our chief revenue officer that it was, but I will certainly confirm that with her. But I believe it was, because we did present to the audit committee, and she provided the NYC audit committee, and she did report a similar thing. But I'll be happy to take that back to her and just confirm that it was done within this time frame.
And we'll get that document to you.
Because like this one issue has been going on for 5 years in your management letter.
Sure.
So I'm just curious, is this going to be, this being 2023, the 6th year?
It's a valid, very valid concern. I think that there have been improvements, though, that even Grant Thornton has noted in terms of the level of the credit balances going down. And I know, Margie, who's our chief revenue cycle officer, has made it a kind of area of effort and focus for her team. She's tried to automate a lot of the refund processes in collaboration with our accounting team, also kind of automate the distribution and repayment of those credits to the various third parties. But it's a valid concern. It continues to kind of appear, even though it's diminishing. We really want it eradicated. So I will check in with her on kind of where things stand, especially on this policy and procedure, which will most likely go a long way in curing the issue.
Yeah. And on that note, I'm happy to see that the inventory purchases and usages is gone away.
Right.
Well, hopefully it's gone away.
It's
Any
coming.
other comments or questions regarding the management letter? If there are none, Mark, you have one more question. You said
Well,
go.
the accounts, I did, under accounts payable and accrued expenses, there's affiliation, vacation, accrual. Affiliations. Is that accrue? I don't know what. And there's affiliations payable under that.
I believe that relates to our affiliate contract. So most of our providers come to provide services to us by way of an affiliate contract, such as NYU, Mount Sinai, PAGNI. That might relate to the, pursuant to those agreements or contracts. We have to fund their vacation and leave.
So
I
they
believe there's a process by which we capture that for financial statement purposes, what the accrued expenses, and then we report it here.
So the word affiliations means a contracting party rather than a legal affiliate.
Yeah, I believe in this context, it relates to the affiliate contracts, which, they're the medical affiliates that we contract to provide medical services to our facilities for.
So that's what you call them rather than, okay.
All right, if there's no other comments or questions regarding HHC.
Health and hospitals.
It would always be HAC to me.
If you guys want a couple of typos, I'm not going to bother anybody now, but I'll tear the pages out and send them to you.
No, Mr. Kaplan, you can just send us your whole workbook and then, we'll make sure you get it back.
I don't ever want to see it again.
But yeah, I'd like to thank you all for coming this morning. And whoever put this on the screen, if you could just remove it.
And tell me who I should send it to.
Send it to
Me,
Who?
James.
Oh,
James
okay.
Leonhardt.
All
Okay.
right, so I'd like to thank you all for coming this morning and good luck.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure meeting you all.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
Thank you, everyone. Mikhail, we can stop recording.
Do me a favor, would you send me